That is correct. You're officially rocking with the best. Yours truly, Stess The Emcee, and we got somebody very, very special on the phone. If you could introduce yourself, sir.
Talib Kweli.
Now, Mr. Kweli, I always told myself if I ever got a chance to interview you, the very first question I would ask you is, did you think in your career as an MC that you would be so revered amongst your peers?
Oh, you're too kind. I focused on the lyrics and the art, and so I think, people notice that. You know what I'm saying? Like, people, the one thing no one can take away from me is the integrity, and it's because of what I focus on. I think whatever you focus on is ultimately what you're going to end up doing.
Definitely. I think a lot of people in a lot of interviews, they always go back to being name dropped on the Black album. But the moment I realized how revered you were, I think it was like in 2003, 50 Cent got to be like a special editor for XXL, and they said, who's the artist you want to interview? And your name came up, and he said, the Talib Kweli is my favorite MC. That's who I want to interview. And so that's how I learned pretty much how you're perceived and how people look at you in the game. One thing that you did do recently was you came down to Tallahassee, Florida. If you'd like to touch on the reason that you did that.
That's right. I came down. I slept over at the wonderful office of Governor Rick Scott at the Capitol building with the Dream Defenders. The Dream Defenders is a student-based, mostly students from FAMU, but student-based organization that is currently in their 27th day of sleeping over at the Capitol, and they're trying to do a host of things, namely repeal Stand Your Ground, repeal zero tolerance, and also try to create community outreach between police and the neighborhoods, because there's a lot of it's like a perfect storm of elements, from the school to prison pipeline to racial profiling to Stand Your Ground, that creates violence and disparity amongst the youth down there, especially black and brown youth. So these guys are standing up as young people putting their bodies and lives on the line, and I came down there to support them.
Now, in the anytime you do anything, somebody's gonna try to throw shade on it. Somebody's gonna have something negative to say. A lot of people said, Talib, you're from New York City. There's so much going on in New York. Why take the time to even come to Tallahassee, such a small city?
True. There's stuff going on in New York. We have stop and frisk. We got our own problems with our own there. But Florida right now is in the national debate. Florida is at the center of the national discussion on race, on Stand Your Ground, on racial profiling, on moving legislation. And because Florida is on the front line, there's a lot of people who say, well, let's boycott Florida. I feel like the people in Florida can't boycott Florida. Florida's on the front line, and the reason I'm in Florida is because of the Dream Defenders. They stood up. They the ones who stood up and took a stand. If someone had took a stand someplace else, that's where I would have been.
Okay.
I know where the people are that's standing up, and that's where they happen to be right now.
Why do you think that so few in the hip-hop community have come down and done that? I mean, a lot of people have tweeted and Facebooked and, mentioned it, but not a lot of people have been willing. I know yourself, Kevin Powell has come down. Why do you think a lot of people in the hip-hop community haven't made that journey yet?
I think we're just in a different generation, a generation that doesn't understand the need for activism to be physical. Online activism is very easy. You can click a button, click a link, retweet something, and pat yourself on the back like you did something. And that's all good. I encourage people to do that. I'm not trying to hate on that or say you shouldn't do that. You should do that. But, without people who are actually sleeping in those buildings, like in Arab Spring in Egypt, without the people in the square, all that tweeting doesn't do anything unless the people are actually in the square. So me, as someone who comes from a generation that knows that that's necessary, I felt it was only right for me to step up. You can't be mad at somebody for something they don't know. All we can do is show them what they don't know.
Exactly. And you yourself, you're actually a father of two, correct?
Yes, my son was with me at Tallahassee as well.
Okay, so when things like these arise, how do you, as a parent, like it's one thing to be an MC and an artist to address these things. How do you do it for somebody, especially like your son? He's a teenager, correct?
That's right. He's 17.
And how do you
going to school in Orlando next year?
Okay. So how do you explain these kind of situations, or maybe even this situation in particular? How did you address that with him?
I mean, I brought him down to Tallahassee. I was like, you got to be down with the Dream Defenders. You got to sleep in the Capitol, see what people your age are doing. Don't. It's not just it's not just the Harry Belafontes and the people older than me and then people my age. It's young kids leading the charge. So I wanted him to meet people in Florida, since he's going to be going to school in Florida, that was doing that work.
Definitely. I just think it's incredibly commendable that you are the type of artist that not only will talk about something, that you'll also be about action. What instilled that in you? I know that you have very educated, scholarly parents. What in you instilled that idea of actually not just talking about something, but actually being about something?
Definitely my parents. I grew up in an activist household. You're taught to be proud and to invest in our community. But then the hip hop that I was listening to at the time I was coming of age also reinforced those themes for me as well. Yeah,
because from what I've heard in previous interviews, you were actually a very big Native Tongues fan. Is that correct?
That's right. I was a fan of hip hop in general. Hip hop when I was a teenager had a lot more balance on the radio and the mainstream than it does right now. You still have that balance of hip hop, but if you're a fan of it, you got to search it out. You're not gonna find it on the radio.
Well, that's very true. So how do you, as an artist, how do you try to adapt to that climate? Because on our programs, myself and DJ A to the L, we do play a considerable amount of your music, but there's not a lot of people playing artists like yourself. How do you try? What do you do to try to adapt to that?
Well, I mean, I got to qualify that. There's not a lot of people who are doing radio, or doing mainstream radio. Yeah. I get love for people who are doing underground radio, people who are their own program directors, Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I'm not a mainstream artist like that. I'm perfectly fine with that. I've built a career out of being who I am. I travel the world. My career is better than the vast majority of most rappers.
Yeah.
So a lot of my fans lament and get upset, like, oh, Kweli slept on, he's underrated. And I appreciate all that love, but I really don't feel slept on. I'm appreciated by those who matter.
Okay. Do you ever feel...
That's the greats, and that's the greats. The greats matter.
Definitely. Is it ever disheartening, though? I mean, because, like, Prisoner of Consciousness, that only did, like 14,000 copies or something? Like, it wasn't a huge sale.
14,000 first week, but look at what everybody else did first week. I still was the number 7 album on Billboard.
Very true. Another thing that I always found pretty interesting, before you were signed, you were actually good friends with John Forte, that's correct?
Uh-huh.
How did you meet John Forte? How did that relationship come about? I know it always gets mentioned in interviews, but I never really heard the story of how you actually know him.
I met him through my friend Rubik's. I was 14 years old. We used to hop the train and go to Washington Square Park. And one day Rubik's always just talk about his man Forte. He's like, my man Forte. And then one day Forte came to join us, and we actually went to the new music seminar that day.
Okay.
Where Bankstar performed.
Okay. And then he later went on to be like an A&R at Ruckus, wasn't he?
Yes, he was an A&R.
And then I guess that's kind of your connection through Ruckus. Is that right?
Actually, yeah. When Forte was A&R, I wasn't really messing with Ruckus. But years after that, they put out a single with Mos Def, and it was Mos Def who was like, "Yo, you should like with Ruckus." Who already knew them from Forte.
Okay, yeah, because Mos and you and Forte and some others, y'all used to like rhyme in the park growing up and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay, and I was always curious because I was speaking with DJ A to the L prior to the interview. Ruckus Records from like 97 to like 03 was like the greatest record label to me. And then it just kind of, I guess, what was it? Was it needing a radio single? Did the people that ran Ruckus just kind of lose track of what they were doing originally?
A little bit. But I think, it's just the business changed and the way that they wanted to do business changed up. You had to link up with a major, and they linked up with a major, and then it was like the majors, they got bought out a little bit. They linked up with Geffen got bought by Interscope. Interscope was doing his own thing.
Yeah. And then where did that put you at that time?
I was signed to Interscope.
Okay.
And I got out of my Interscope deal.
Yeah.
And got to on Warner Brothers.
I got you. And now the new album was self-financed, is that right?
Yes.
So is that pretty much what you are now, just 100% independent?
Well, no, I'm distributed by Caroline EMI. It's a distribution, but I own my company.
I got you. But
we do major distribution, but indie label.
Okay, but the album before that was through Duck Down, is that right?
No, it wasn't. It was through the same label, Javoti, but Duck Down, the cats who run Duck Down, Drew and Noah, they have a company called 3D, which is distribution. So they distributed it, and I benefited from their knowledge from them. They've been running Duck Down for years, so I got all the benefits of the Duck Down crew, but it didn't come out through Duck Down.
I see. Okay. Drew Ha is somebody that I've also idolized for years, and everybody over at that label. To kind of switch back over, a little bit more serious in a conversation. Because one thing.
Hold on for a second. Hello?
Yeah.
What'd you say?
I was saying, just kind of switch over a little bit serious. One thing I've always admired about you is you're not one of those people that really kind of bites your tongue. You're more of a sincere person whenever you speak. What does the stand your ground law mean to you?
Stand your ground is complicated. The most complicated thing about stand your ground right now is that people, the Zimmerman trial, they didn't use it. They didn't use it because they knew if they used it, they would lose. But it's still something that needs to be taken down. It's still something that I feel like it encourages a culture of violence, because it encourages you to act violently instead of retreating when you're in a problem. Stand your ground law is also racist, because the vast majority of stand your ground cases where a white person is using it against a black person, they get away with it, whereas the other way around, they don't get away with it. On top of that, you got gang warfare, and you got people using stand your ground to get away with gang shootings, and that's black on black crime. So it's problematic on a lot of levels. But the biggest problem to me that I see with it is that it creates a situation where there's you got school to prison pipeline, you got racial profiling, and you got stand your ground. It just kind of criminalizes young people and criminalizes, it's messed up on that level.
And the school to prison pipeline, kind of explain that.
In Florida, y'all have a law called zero tolerance. So let's say a student in 8th grade throws a spitball at another student. They calling the cops. That's what they doing. So now you have young people who now have a record for doing stuff that kids are doing all their life. And so that's the school to prison pipeline. When you're automatically making kids felon and criminalizing kids for minor offenses, like smoking weed or stuff. And it's still racial. Like white kids get prosecuted 11 times less than black kids for weed, little nonsense like that,
So with everything going on in Florida, you as a parent, how you feel about your son going to college down here?
Well, he wanted to go to Full Sail. Full Sail is an excellent university. I'm just trying to give him the knowledge so he.
Definitely. So your son is going to get involved in music? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, that's what he's doing.
Oh, okay. So is that going to be difficult for him? Because for Christ's sake, his dad's Talib Kweli. So